Hi, I'm Laura Hedgecock, coming to you from my basement in Michigan in the United States. I am an author, blogger, speaker, and genealogy nut, as well as a nature nut. Why do family historians need to tell their family stories? It's something I'm really passionate about. So I'm going to start talking to you about it by telling a story of my own. But first, the obligatory RootsTech disclaimer. The content of this video, as well as the thoughts, views, and opinions herein, belong solely to the creator and do not necessarily reflect the views of FamilySearch International and RootsTech. I have my own disclaimer as well. Many of the photographs you'll see in this presentation are my own. So this is your gentle reminder that even when photographs are shared online, the photographer retains the copyright, so that we that are attending this conference cannot screenshot and share them unless we have that photographer's permission. So on to my story. A couple of years ago, one April Sunday afternoon, I looked out my kitchen window and saw two birds fighting on our driveway. This wasn't your normal territorial little flapping of wings and angry tweets at each other. This was a rolling around, feathers flying, ugly fight between two nuthatches. If you're not familiar with nuthatches, they're these small bluish birds. Nuthatches are pretty common here in Michigan. They're cute. They have a subtle beauty with little pointed beaks. If you've ever seen a little blue and white bird heading down a tree trunk head first, that was probably a nuthatch. I ran outside, which broke up the little tuss-up. The bird who was quote unquote winning flew up onto the edge of my rooftop over the porch. The other little bird lay all off kilter, sideways, laying on the driveway, one wing out. And he looked a lot worse for wear. While I was there watching, I was just wondering, how is this little bird ever going to recover? And while I was just standing there, I'm going to call him a bully bird. It might not be appropriate since birds are all natural and they don't have the same motivations as humans do, but just for the sake of the story, I'm going to call him the bully bird. The other bird flew down and gave the poor laying on his side bird one last vicious peck, which flipped the bird back over on his stomach. So I, of course, yelled something completely coherent and normal at the bird, like, "Hey, you!" And the bird flew off. Oh, I yelled for my husband, who must have been watching out of the window too, because no sooner had I called his name than the front door opened. He came out carrying a cracker box, graham cracker box, and he had opened it up and fashioned it into sort of a tent. So he hands it to me and tells me to put it over the bird. He says it'll give the bird a chance to recover and he might be fine. I married an optimist, but he's also smart, so I did what he told me to do. We left the little bird to the privacy of his graham cracker tent and watched him through the kitchen window. In about 20 minutes, he had managed to just get his little legs under him a little bit. After another 20 minutes, I couldn't resist, and I went out to talk to him. You know, the things you say to an injured bird. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Mostly, I told him I wish I knew what to do for him, because I was still quite concerned about his prognosis. And as I did, he got his legs under him a little more and kind of stood, and then he took a hop right towards me. I was so relieved and flattered. thinking maybe he actually knew that I didn't mean him any harm. Another half an hour went by, and this was spring in Michigan, so the temperature was continuing to drop. While I waited, I had consulted a local rescue organization and have found out that the best thing to do for the little thing was to find it a warm, dark place to recover. I'd also consulted several friends via text. So I went in the house and I found a shoebox, poked holes in it, and had decided he could spend the night in our bathroom. But when I went back outside and I cooed at him, he had come to his senses enough to realize that this was not a good thing, having a human approach you with a shoebox. And so he startled at first, he flapped, and he flew away to a nearby tree. Folks, I was so relieved. The rest of the evening until dark, I kept going outside, checking to make sure he wasn't laying on the ground somewhere. And I said to my husband over and over, I'm so glad we didn't have to figure out what to do. And really what I meant was, I'm so glad we didn't have to watch this little birdie die. I even texted some of my friends with the good news, because I had, of course, texted with the problem. And suddenly, not just me, but several people I know cared about a little bird, my little nuthatch. And today, many months later, perhaps some of you listening to me have come to care just a little bit about a random little bird in Michigan. That's really what we want to do with the research that we do on our ancestors. We want to write and share stories so that other people, their descendants, will connect with them and with their family history. In fact, we don't want their descendants to think of the story as, oh, the story about John Smith. We want them to think of it as my John Smith, my great-great-grandparent or uncle or what have you. Ladies and gentlemen, stories are more engaging than names and dates. Stories transport us to a different time, into a different place. And they work so well with family history because genealogy is about a whole lot more than names and dates. Because those dates, those names, those facts tell us the who, what, when, and where. But it's the stories that explain the how. The stories that explain why it happened, or why it might have happened, or how people felt about it as it happened. For instance, here are the names and the basic facts of my maternal great-great-grandfather, Van Buren Field Clark, and my paternal great-great-grandfather, Thomas E. Dunaway. Obviously, I've never met either one of them. I have a single photo of Van Buren Field Clark, not even a single one of Thomas Dunaway. I've researched both of them. They lived in similar times. They lived similar lives. Both were farmers, and both were poor farmers. Both served as privates in the Confederate Army during the American Civil War. So there were similar records available for both of them. So the paper trail gives me two not very different men. However, I feel a lot more connected to my maternal great-great-grandfather, Van Buren Field Clark. You want to know why? Because my maternal grandmother, Hazel, wrote down stories about her grandfather. She passed down some interesting war stories, though as of yet unconfirmed, especially the one about when he had the drop on a Union soldier and decided not to take it, and the soldier returned the favor later during the war. She did confirm that the two men corresponded through the rest of their lives. But more importantly than that, through her stories, I know that despite being a soldier, he was a gentle person. He was an animal lover and a man of deep faith. I also know that he and his wife, my great-great-grandmother, took my grandmother in when she was about 12 and her own father had abandoned her, that he was a loving, invested grandpa. So in other words, when I look back at him through his granddaughter's adoring eyes, his stories resonate with me. We want to write stories about our ancestors that connect emotionally, connect intellectually. But we often overlook the most obvious way of helping our loved ones connect with our family stories. We, like the family photographer, forget to put ourselves in the frame. That leaves a deficit that I know quite well. My mom was an out and out camera bug, not necessarily a photographer with all the expertise and thoughtfulness that that implies. She snapped pictures, a lot of them. So sadly though, we have very few pictures of her, particularly from the 60s and the 70s when my sister and I were yet too young to be doing any photo snapping of our own. But even in the 80s and 90s, up until the births of my children, she was in very, very few pictures. It was only when she had grandchildren, something she only got to enjoy for about 4 years of our lives together, did she want to be included in the shot. I know, it was her prerogative, but it is a loss for the rest of the family. I get it. It really isn't easy to put your heart on your sleeve. And the photographer analogy works well because, like my mother, I never, ever like seeing pictures of myself. And this photo that I'm sharing with you here is no different. But I love that I preserved the moment when my goofy son graduated from middle school. There's a reason that our first diaries come with a lock and a key. For most of us, sharing our feelings, let alone our most personal thoughts and stories, doesn't come easily or naturally. But telling your stories from the heart is the best way to connect your family and readers to your ancestors, to bring them alive, so to speak. Those stories are important to connect us to the past and to connect with the family history. And we can share about all our ancestors, even the ones that didn't have the equivalent to flashy feathers. We can tell stories about all our ancestors, even the quote-unquote plain ones, because there's always a subtle beauty in their lives. For instance, with a little research about their context, we can bring recognition and understanding to even our ancestors that we don't have a lot of hard facts about other than those names and dates. So we can increase the connections between their descendants and their stories. Because let's face it, not all our ancestors were exotic types that maybe crossed an ocean. In fact, not all of them even left a whole bunch of records for us to go from. Not all of our ancestors were known for their great military prowess. Many of them are simply listed as being there, another private. But by understanding the conflicts in which they served and understanding their life's circumstances, we can bring those stories alive as well. And only a few of our ancestors, at best, are verified patriots. A lot more of our ancestors are early, if not original settlers. Perhaps they weren't early settlers of a continent, but perhaps of a city, of a place, of an area. And these stories of picking up and taking life and planting it somewhere else are quite riveting. And all of them connect readers to that family's history. Stories of homesteaders, for instance, are full of overcoming adversity and having perseverance and an adventurous spirit and a lot of hard work. Those are great stories. And the stories of the ones that just kept up with the children are also stories of a universal human experience and are so much more connectional than the names and the dates of their births and deaths. So I encourage you to tell the stories of all your ancestors, including the ones who tended the garden or the farm, or made their living from the sea. The truth is, family historians, whether you're just starting out or you've done it for decades, family historians have a unique power to connect others to the family tree. And it doesn't have to be the beautiful, perfectly shaped, iconic family tree that you see all the time. Regardless of its shape, regardless of how well it's filled out, your stories can make it the beloved shade tree that's in the middle of the backyard. You know, the one that everybody loves to sit under, the one that the kids love to climb. The analogy I like to make is the stories you pass on act like little boards up the trunk of the tree that make it easier for the kids or the young at heart to climb. Maybe it's even like adding a tire swing, so it's a place of fun and connection. Thanks for watching this presentation and making me and my little bird story a part of your RootsTech Connect experience. I hope it's been inspiring / that I've convinced you to include family storytelling in your other family history endeavors, because it really is the backbone of what the research is all about. Oh, as I share my links for my website and my photos of my books, all of those links are in your syllabus, by the way. I also wanted to remind you that all these presentations during the RootsTech Connect live time frame have chats, and I encourage you, if you have any questions or comments, to put them in the chat. I'll be checking it a couple of 3-4 times to make sure I have a chance to connect with you. And so once again, thank you so much and have a great rest of your RootsTech Connect experience.